The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the grand ballroom as 300 guests watched in stunned silence. My cheek burned from the sharp sting of her palm, and red wine dripped from my cream-colored dress onto the pristine marble floor. The sound of that slap still echoed in my ears, louder than the gasps that rippled through the crowd. "How dare you ruin my perfect day!" Rebecca's voice cut through the air like a blade. My sister-in-law stood there in her $1,000 wedding gown, her face twisted with rage, an empty wine glass still clutched in her manicured fingers. "Can't you watch where you're going, you clumsy fool?" I had only wanted to give her a hug, a simple, loving gesture to congratulate her on her wedding day. But my heel had caught the delicate edge of her train, and in that split second, everything had unraveled. "Rebecca's right." My husband Fernando's voice cut through my shock like a second slap. He stepped closer to his sister, his eyes cold as they met mine. "You should have been more careful. This is her special day, and you nearly destroyed her dress." The betrayal hit harder than the physical blow. 300 pairs of eyes stared at me, some with pity, others with judgment, most with uncomfortable silence. I stood there, wine staining my dress, my cheek on fire, feeling smaller than I had in years. That's when Travis, the groom, stepped forward. His jaw was set, his dark eyes blazing with an anger I'd never seen before. He moved toward the microphone with deliberate, measured steps that made the entire room hold its breath. "Did you just—" His voice boomed through the sound system, each word crystal clear. "Slap the CEO of Caden Marketing?" The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that vast ballroom. 300 guests froze as if time itself had stopped. I watched this recognition dawn on faces throughout the crowd. Whispers began like a gentle breeze, then grew into a storm of shocked murmurs. The waiters, who moments before had been standing against the walls like invisible servants, suddenly straightened. Their eyes widened as they looked at me with new understanding. Within seconds, they were rushing forward, bowing deeply, frantically offering napkins and assistance. "Ma'am, please, let us help you," one of them stammered, his hands shaking as he tried to dab the wine from my dress. But Travis wasn't finished. He gripped the microphone tighter, his knuckles white with tension. "The woman you just publicly humiliated," his voice carried to every corner of the room, "is not just any guest. She's the woman who saved my career 5 years ago when no one else would take a chance on me. She's the woman who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, and she did it all while choosing to live quietly, humbly, never flaunting her success." Rebecca's face had drained of all color. The confident, radiant bride from moments before now looked like she might faint. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. Fernando's expression shifted from smugness to dawning horror as the weight of his words sank in. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no sound came out. "And," Travis continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I'm about to become his business partner in the biggest merger this industry has ever seen. A merger that was supposed to be announced next week." The word "was" hung in the air like a death sentence. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. Let me take you back to understand how I ended up in that moment. Standing in a pool of spilled wine, my life's carefully constructed facade crumbling around me. My name is Ruth Sinclair, though most people in my personal life knew me simply as Ruth Matthews after I married Fernando 3 years ago. At 32, I had built something most people only dream of, a global marketing empire that influenced brands across 6 continents. Caden Marketing wasn't just successful, it was legendary in business circles. But I had made a choice early in my career. Power corrupts, and I had seen too many successful women become isolated, surrounded by only people who wanted something from them. So I decided to live two lives. In the boardroom, I was Ruth Sinclair, the iron-willed CEO who could make or break careers with a single decision. At home, I was just Ruth, Fernando's quiet wife who worked some marketing job and preferred staying in to going to fancy parties. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I drove a modest Honda and shopped at Target. I could have lived in a mansion, but Fernando and I shared a comfortable suburban home. I could have worn designer everything, but I chose simple, elegant pieces that didn't scream wealth. Fernando never questioned my choice to keep my work life private. In fact, he seemed to prefer it. He worked as a regional sales manager for a mid-sized company, earning a respectable but unremarkable salary. In his mind, he was the breadwinner, the head of the household. I let him believe it because I loved him and because I thought love was enough. How wrong I was. The problem started small. Fernando's sister Rebecca had always been the princess of their family, spoiled, dramatic, and utterly convinced that the world revolved around her. She worked as a social media influencer, though her follower count was modest and her income even more so. But she lived like she was famous, constantly in debt, constantly asking Fernando for money. Family comes first, Fernando would say whenever I gently suggested that maybe Rebecca needed to learn some financial responsibility. She's my little sister, I have to take care of her. At first I found his loyalty admirable, but as the months passed, I began to see a pattern. Rebecca would create drama and Fernando would rush to her side. She would criticize me, and Fernando would either join in or stay silent. She would make demands, and Fernando would bend over backwards to fulfill them.
Rebecca had championed Travis Thompson, a successful architect who had recently started his own firm. The engagement had been a whirlwind. They'd only been dating 8 months when he proposed, but Rebecca was over the moon, and Fernando was thrilled that his sister was marrying someone successful. What neither of them knew was that Travis and I had history. Not romantic history, but professional. 5 years earlier, when he was a struggling architect with big dreams and no connections, he had pitched his ideas to Caden Marketing. My team had been impressed, but the project was risky. Most of my board members had advised against it. I had overruled them. Something about Travis's passion and vision had reminded me of myself in the early days. We had taken his concept and turned it into a campaign that launched 3 major developments and established his reputation in the industry. Travis had never forgotten that. While the rest of the world knew Ruth Sinclair as a powerful CEO, Travis knew her as the woman who had believed in him when no one else would. He had recognized me the moment Fernando introduced us as his family. I saw the recognition in his eyes, followed quickly by confusion. Why was Ruth Sinclair introducing herself as just Ruth and letting Fernando talk down to her? Why was she sitting quietly while Rebecca made snide comments about her little marketing job? I had asked him privately to keep my identity secret. I wasn't ready for my 2 worlds to collide. I thought I could keep managing both lives, keeping the peace, making everyone happy. The morning of the wedding, I should have known something was wrong. Rebecca had been unusually sweet to me, asking me to help with last-minute details, complimenting my dress. I thought maybe we were finally starting to connect. I was so naive. The Grandview Manor was the kind of venue that made you feel like you were in a fairy tale. Soaring ceilings, marble columns, and crystal chandeliers created an atmosphere of old-world elegance. Rebecca had spared no expense, though I suspected most of it was being paid for by Fernando and indirectly by me with our joint account. I had arrived early to help with final preparations, wearing a cream-colored dress that I thought was appropriate, elegant but not attention-grabbing. I should have known that Rebecca would find fault with it. "Ruth, "You look lovely," Travis had said when he saw me during the rehearsal. His eyes held a warmth and respect that I rarely saw from my own husband anymore. "That color suits you perfectly." Rebecca's smile had faltered slightly at the compliment, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, yes, Ruth always looks so professional." The way she said professional made it sound like an insult. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Rebecca looked stunning in her designer gown, and Travis's face when she saw her walking down the aisle was genuinely touching. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe this day would mark a new beginning for all of us. The reception started smoothly. The food was exquisite, the band was talented, and the guests seemed to be enjoying themselves. I stayed in the background, as I always did, letting Rebecca have her moment in the spotlight. Fernando had barely spoken to me all day except to point out things I could do to help. "Ruth, can you make sure the gift table is organized? Ruth, the photographer needs someone to gather the family for photos, but stay out of the way." Each request felt like a small cut, but I complied. It was Rebecca's day after all. The trouble began during the dinner speeches. Fernando had been asked to give a toast as the brother of the bride, and I watched with growing unease as he spoke. My sister Rebecca has always been special. She's talented, beautiful, ambitious, everything a man could want in a wife. "Travis, you're getting a real prize." He paused, his eyes finding mine across the room. Rebecca has never been content to just blend into the background. She's always reached for more, always pushed herself to achieve greatness. That's something I really admire about her. The implication was clear, and the sting was intentional. Unlike some people who are content to be invisible, he was saying, unlike some people who lack ambition. The guests applauded, but I caught several of them glancing at me with uncomfortable expressions. Even strangers could sense the undercurrent of his words. After dinner, as the dancing began, I tried to shake off my hurt feelings. I circulated among the guests, making small talk, playing the role of the supportive sister-in-law. Several people complimented me on the wedding, assuming I had helped with the planning. "You and Rebecca must be so close," one elderly guest commented. "The bride is lucky to have such a lovely sister-in-law." I smiled and nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If only she knew how Rebecca really felt about me. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing alone near the gift table, watching Fernando dance with Rebecca. They were laughing together, lost in their sibling bond, and I felt like an outsider looking in on someone else's family. That's when Travis approached me. "You seemed quiet tonight," he said, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "It's Rebecca's day," I replied automatically. "I'm happy to stay in the background." He studied my face for a long moment. "Ruth, can I ask you something? Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me that? When was the last time I had asked myself that? "Of course," I said, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Travis looked like he wanted to say more, but just then, Rebecca appeared beside us, slightly breathless from dancing.
"Travis, there you are. I need you for pictures with the wedding party." She linked her arm through his possessively, then glanced at me. "Ruth, could you make sure the cake cutting is set up properly? The photographer wants to do it in 10 minutes. "Of course," I said, already moving toward the cake table. As I walked away, I heard Rebecca's voice, not quite low enough to be private. "I don't know why Ruth always looks so serious. She should try to have fun for once." Travis's response was too quiet for me to hear, but his tone sounded disapproving. The cake cutting went smoothly, with Rebecca feeding Travis a bite while the photographer captured every moment. The guests applauded and cheered, and Rebecca basked in the attention. Then came the moment that changed everything. As Rebecca and Travis finished with the formal photos, she turned toward the crowd with a bright smile. Her eyes found mine across the room, and she beckoned me over. "Ruth, come here, sister-in-law." I was surprised by the invitation, but pleased that she wanted to include me. Maybe the wedding had put her in a generous mood. I made my way through the crowd, careful not to bump into any of the other guests. Rebecca was glowing with happiness, her cheeks flushed from champagne and excitement. She opened her arms wide as I approached. "I want to thank you for all your help today," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Come here and give me a proper hug." I stepped forward, genuinely touched by her gesture. For a moment, I thought maybe all the tension between us had been in my head. Maybe this was the fresh start I had hoped for. I leaned in to embrace her, my heart feeling lighter than it had all day. That's when my heel caught on the delicate beating of her train. The sound of tearing fabric was soft, almost gentle, but in that moment, it might as well have been a gunshot. I felt the delicate material give way under my heel, saw Rebecca's eyes widen in horror, and knew that my moment of hope had been shattered. "My dress!" Rebecca's shriek cut through the ambient chatter like a knife. "You ruined my dress!" I immediately stepped back, my hands raised in apology. "Rebecca, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to?" Her voice rose to a pitch that made nearby guests wince. "You stepped on my wedding dress. On my wedding day?" The damage was actually minimal. A few beads had come loose from the hem of her extensive train. It wasn't even visible unless you were looking for it, but Rebecca's reaction made it seem like I had torn her dress in half. "Rebecca, please let me—" That's when her palm connected with my cheek. The slap resonated through the ballroom like a thunderclap. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The band faltered and fell silent. 300 guests turned to stare at the unfolding drama. My cheek burned, but the shock was worse than the pain. I stood there, stunned, my hand instinctively rising to touch my face. "How dare you?" Rebecca's voice carried to every corner of the room. "This is my special day, and you're too clumsy to even give me a proper hug without destroying everything." She grabbed a glass of red wine from a nearby table and, before I could react, poured it down the front of my dress. The cold liquid soaked through the fabric, staining the cream color a dark crimson. "There," she said, her chest heaving with anger. "Now we both have ruined dresses." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, could sense the shock and discomfort radiating from the crowd. Some guests looked horrified, others embarrassed. A few seemed almost entertained by the drama. But it was Fernando's reaction that broke my heart. Instead of coming to my defense, instead of telling his sister that her reaction was completely inappropriate, he stepped closer to Rebecca with a look of concern. "Ruth, what is wrong with you?" he said. His voice carried clearly through the silent room. "This is Rebecca's wedding day. The least you could do is watch where you're going." He put his arm around his sister protectively. "You know how important this day is to her. How could you be so careless?" The betrayal tore me apart. My own husband was taking his sister's side, was publicly humiliating me in front of all these people. He was treating me like I had deliberately tried to ruin the wedding. "Fernando," I whispered, but my voice was lost in the shocked murmurs that were beginning to ripple through the crowd. Rebecca leaned into her brother's protective embrace, playing the victim perfectly. She said, "I just wanted to thank her for her help. I never expected her to be so clumsy." "Don't worry about it," Fernando said, stroking her hair like she was a child. "Ruth should have been more careful. She knows better." The words hit me like individual daggers. He was treating me like a scolded child, like someone whose feelings and dignity didn't matter. In front of all these people, he was making it clear that his loyalty lay with his sister, not with his wife. I stood there in my wine-stained dress, my cheeks still burning from the slap, feeling smaller and more humiliated than I had ever felt in my life. The powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions felt like she was disappearing, leaving behind only a shell of a woman who had been publicly degraded by her own family. That's when I heard the sharp click of dress shoes on marble. Travis was walking toward the microphone with purposeful strides, his face a mask of controlled fury. The wedding guests, still buzzing with shocked whispers about the scene they had just witnessed, began to quiet down as they sensed something significant was about to happen. He reached the microphone and tapped it twice. The sound echoed through the ballroom, commanding absolute attention.
Ladies and gentlemen. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made everyone straighten in their seats. I need to address what just happened here. Rebecca looked up at her new husband with confusion, clearly expecting him to comfort her and perhaps make some speech about how accidents happen and the show must go on. She had no idea what was coming. Rebecca, did you just... Travis's voice grew stronger, more commanding. Slap the CEO of Caden Marketing? The effect of his words was immediate and electric. I watched as recognition dawned on face after face throughout the crowd. Business people who knew my company's reputation, socialites who had heard whispers about the mysterious Ruth Sinclair, professionals who had seen my name in the financial papers. Suddenly they all realized who they were looking at. The whispers started like a gentle breeze. Caden Marketing? Isn't that... Oh my God! That's Ruth Sinclair! I can't believe it! But Travis wasn't finished. His next words would change everything. Travis gripped the microphone with both hands, his knuckles white with controlled anger. The entire ballroom held its breath, sensing that whatever came next would be monumental. The woman my wife just publicly humiliated is Ruth Sinclair. The Ruth Sinclair. More gasps rippled through the crowd. I could see people pulling out their phones, frantically Googling my name, their faces lighting up with shock as they confirmed what Travis was telling them. Rebecca's bouquet trembled in her hands. Her face had gone completely pale, the confident bride replaced by someone who was beginning to realize she had made a catastrophic mistake. Ruth Sinclair, Travis continued, built Caden Marketing from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. She's been featured on the cover of Forbes 3 times. She's been named one of the most influential women in business for 5 consecutive years. Fernando's smug expression was cracking, replaced with growing horror as the magnitude of the situation became clear. But more importantly, Travis's voice softened slightly, though it lost none of its intensity. 5 years ago, when I was a nobody architect with big dreams and no connections, Ruth took a chance on me. When every other marketing firm in the city turned me away, when every board member advised against it, Ruth saw potential in my work. He looks directly at me, his eyes filled with gratitude and respect. She didn't just give me a contract. She championed my vision. She fought for my projects when others doubted them. She turned my small architectural firm into one of the most successful in the region. The room was absolutely silent now. You could have heard a whisper from across the ballroom. And now, Travis's voice hardened again, I was supposed to announce next week that Thompson Architecture and Caden Marketing are entering into the largest partnership in both our company's history, a partnership worth $200 million. Rebecca made a small, strangled sound. Even she could understand numbers that big. Was. Travis repeated, letting the road hang in the air. Because after what I witnessed here tonight, after seeing how my wife treats the woman who made my career possible, I'm not sure that partnership can move forward. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. Rebecca wasn't just facing personal embarrassment, she had potentially cost her new husband millions of dollars with her tantrum. But Travis still wasn't finished. He looked down at his bride, his expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. Rebecca, you just slapped one of the most powerful women in the country. You poured wine on someone who could buy and sell everything you've ever owned with pocket change. You humiliated a woman who has more class and dignity in her little finger than you've shown in your entire life. Rebecca's knees buckled slightly. She gripped Fernando's arm for support, but even he was staring at her with dawning horror. And Fernando, Travis's attention turned to my husband, you just publicly humiliated your own wife, the woman you promised to love and protect, the woman who, I'm guessing, has been supporting you financially without you even realizing it. Fernando's face went white as the pieces clicked into place. My modest lifestyle, my reluctance to discuss work, my ability to pay for things without ever seeming stressed about money, suddenly it all made sense. Travis looked back at the crowd, his voice rising to address all 300 guests. You've all just witnessed something extraordinary. You've seen a woman of incredible power and influence choose to live humbly, choose to put family first, choose love over status. And you've seen that kindness repaid with cruelty. The waiters, who had been standing frozen against the walls, suddenly sprang into action. They rushed forward, bowing deeply as they offered napkins and assistance. "Ma'am, please, let us help you," one of them stammered, his voice shaking with nervous respect. Other staff members appeared with cleaning supplies, gently dabbing at my dress, while treating me like visiting royalty. The transformation was surreal. Moments before, I had been the clumsy sister-in-law who had ruined the wedding. Now I was being treated with the deference usually reserved for heads of state.
But I barely noticed their ministrations. My eyes were locked on Rebecca's face as the full weight of her actions sank in. The color had drained completely from her cheeks, leaving her looking almost ghostly in her white gown. "Travis," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know. I never meant—" "You never meant what?" he asked, his voice cold. "You never meant to show your true character in front of 300 witnesses? You never meant to reveal that all your talk about being kind and loving was just an act?" Fernando finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled croak. "Ruth, why didn't you tell me?" I looked at my husband, really looked at him for what felt like the first time in months. I saw the man I had fallen in love with, but I also saw the man who had just chosen his sister over me in the most public and humiliating way possible. "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly, my voice somehow carrying in the silent room. "Would you have treated me differently if you had known, or would you have just found new ways to make me feel small?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. We both knew the answer. Travis set the microphone back in its stand and walked toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as he approached, everyone stepping back to give us space. "Ruth," he said softly, his voice full of genuine concern, "are you all right?" I touched my cheek where Rebecca's hand had connected. It was still tender, still burning with the memory of that slap. But as I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me, some shocked, some embarrassed, some filled with newfound respect, I realized something. I was more than all right. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I needed to be. The silence stretched on, heavy and expectant. 300 guests waited to see what I would do next. Rebecca stood frozen in her wedding gown, looking like she might faint at any moment. Fernando stared at me with a mixture of shock and dawning regret. But I felt calm. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely, utterly calm. I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward, gently brushing away the hands of the waiters who were still trying to clean my dress. The wine stain didn't matter anymore. Nothing about my appearance mattered anymore. "May I asked Travis, gesturing toward the microphone. He nodded immediately and stepped aside. I walked to the microphone stand, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The sound seemed amplified in the silent ballroom. I looked out at the sea of faces, at people I had never met and others I had known for years. Some looked curious, some uncomfortable, many seemed genuinely concerned for me. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I suppose introductions are in order. My name is Ruth Sinclair, and yes, I am the CEO of Caden Marketing." A few scattered gasps broke the silence, though most people were still processing what they had learned. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Rebecca and Travis's wedding. It was supposed to be a day of joy and new beginnings.
I paused, letting my eyes find Rebecca's face. She was still pale, still trembling, but now she was looking at me with something that might have been fear. I chose to keep my professional life separate from my personal life because I believed that love and family should be about more than money or status. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have achieved. My voice remained calm, but I could feel the emotion building beneath the surface. 3 years ago, I married Fernando because I loved him. I thought I had found a partner who would support me, who would stand by me, who would protect me when the world became difficult. Fernando flinched as if I had slapped him. I have spent 3 years making myself smaller, quieter, less threatening, because I thought that was what love required. I have listened to criticism about my lack of ambition from people who had no idea what I had built. I have smiled and nodded when I was told I should try harder, do more, be more impressive. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Tonight, I was publicly humiliated by someone I have tried for 3 years to love as a sister. I was physically assaulted, had wine poured on me, and was called names in front of all of you. Rebecca made a small whimpering sound, but I continued. But what hurt more than any of that was watching my husband, the man who promised to love and protect me, choose to defend my attacker rather than stand by my wife. Fernando's face crumpled. "Ruth, please, I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" I turned to face him directly. "You didn't know that your wife deserved basic respect? You didn't know that humiliating someone publicly is wrong? You didn't know that love means standing by your partner even when it's difficult?" He opened his mouth again, but I held up my hand. "The fact that you didn't know who I was professionally is irrelevant, Fernando. You knew who I was as a person. You knew I was kind, loyal, and loving. You knew I had done nothing but try to make your family happy, and when the moment came to choose, you chose cruelty over kindness." I turned back to address the entire room. "I want everyone here to understand something. Power and success don't give anyone the right to be cruel, but they also don't require anyone to accept cruelty." My voice grew stronger with each word. For 3 years, I have been told I should be grateful for love that required me to diminish myself. I have been told that speaking up for myself was selfish. I have been told that wanting respect was asking too much. I looked directly at Rebecca, who was now openly crying. "Rebecca, you have spent 3 years treating me like I was beneath you. You have criticized my appearance, my career, my personality, and my marriage. You have demanded that your brother choose between supporting you and respecting his wife. And tonight, you finally got your answer." The tears were streaming down her face now, leaving tracks in her carefully applied makeup. "But your greatest mistake wasn't slapping me. It wasn't even pouring wine on my dress. Your greatest mistake was doing it in front of Travis, a man who knows my true worth." I turned to Travis, who was watching me with something that looked like pride. "Travis, thank you for defending me tonight. Thank you for seeing my value when my own husband couldn't. But I need you to know that your business partnership with Caden Marketing will move forward exactly as planned." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Because," I continued, "I don't make business decisions based on personal emotions. I make them based on merit, potential, and integrity. You have all 3. I looked back at Rebecca and Fernando. What happened here tonight won't affect Travis's career or his success. He married you, Rebecca, because he loved you, and I respect that. But what happens to your marriage from this point forward will depend on whether you can learn from this moment." Rebecca was sobbing openly now, her designer bouquet forgotten on the floor beside her. "Fernando," I said, my voice softer but no less firm, "I hope someday you understand what you lost tonight. I hope you realize that you threw away something real and valuable for this." I gestured around the room, at the shocked faces and uncomfortable silence. "I'm going to leave now," I announced to the crowd. I wish you all a pleasant evening." I started to walk toward the exit, but Fernando's voice stopped me. "Ruth, please." His voice cracked with desperation. "Don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake, but don't throw away our marriage over one moment of poor judgment." I turned back to face him, and for a moment, my calm mask slipped. He could see the pain in my eyes, the years of accumulated hurt that had led to this moment. "Fernando," I said quietly, but no less firm, "this wasn't one moment of poor judgment. This was 3 years of you choosing everyone else's feelings over mine. 3 years of you making me feel like I had to earn your love by being less than I am." He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. "Ruth, please don't do this. Forgive me for being stupid. I do love you." "No," I said, my voice firm. "You loved having a wife who wouldn't challenge you, who wouldn't outshine you, who would make you feel important and needed." I looked around the room one more time, at all the faces staring back at me. "But you never loved me, because if you had, you would have known that the woman who built Kate in marketing and the woman who made you breakfast every morning were the same person, and you would have been proud of both." The silence that followed my words was profound. It felt like the entire ballroom was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I began walking toward the exit, my head held high, my steps measured and deliberate. The crowd parted before me like I was a queen leaving court. Some guests bowed their heads respectfully as I passed. Others whispered amongst themselves, their phones already out, no doubt sharing the story that would be all over social media within hours. Behind me, I could hear Rebecca's sobs growing louder. "Travis, please," she was saying, her voice high and desperate. "I didn't know. You have to believe me. I never would have—" "You never would have what?" Travis's voice was cold. "Treated someone badly if you knew they had power? That says everything I need to know about your character." "But I love you," Rebecca cried. "This is our wedding day." "Yes," Travis replied, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "This is our wedding day, the day I learned who I really married." Fernando's voice joined the chaos behind me. "Ruth, wait, please. We can work this out. I'll do better, I promise." But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had spent too many years stopping, turning back, giving in to keep the peace. As I neared the exit, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. I turned to see an elderly woman I didn't recognize, her kind face creased with concern. "My dear, that was the most gracious display of strength I've ever witnessed. Your parents raised you well." "Thank you," I managed, touched by her kindness. A younger man stepped forward, his phone already in his hand. "Miss Sinclair, I'm James Lucas from the Business Journal. Would you be willing to—" "Not tonight," I said firmly, but not unkindly. "This is a private family matter." He nodded respectfully and stepped back, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. This story would be news, whether I wanted it to or not. More people approached as I made my way through the crowd. Business contacts who had recognized me, colleagues who had been at the wedding as guests of other attendees, even strangers who simply wanted to express their support.
"Miss Sinclair, I've been following your company for years. What you've built is incredible. Ruth, I had no idea you were Fernando's wife. I'm so sorry for what happened tonight." "Ma'am, that was the most powerful speech I've ever heard. Thank you for showing us what real dignity looks like." Each interaction was brief but meaningful. These people saw me, really saw me, in a way my own husband never had. As I reached the ballroom doors, I heard quick footsteps behind me. I turned to see Travis jogging to catch up. His tie loosened, his face flushed. "Ruth, wait," he said, slightly out of breath. "I need to say something." I paused, curious about what he might add to this surreal evening. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm sorry it took this long for me to speak up. I should have said something the first time I heard Rebecca criticize you. I should have defended you months ago."
I studied his face, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. You weren't responsible for defending me, Travis. That was Fernando's job. Maybe not, he said, glancing back toward the ballroom where the chaos was still unfolding. But I knew who you were. I knew what you'd done for me, for my career, for my entire future, and I stood by while someone treated you like you were nothing. Behind us, I could hear Rebecca's voice getting more hysterical. You can't leave me, not on our wedding day. Travis, please. Travis closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. I need to go back in there and deal with this mess. But Ruth, I want you to know, our partnership stands. Not just the business partnership, but my personal respect for you. What happened tonight doesn't change anything between our companies. I appreciate that. But Travis, you need to think carefully about what you're going back to. Marriage is hard enough without starting it with this kind of betrayal of character. He nodded grimly. I know, but she's my wife now, and I need to at least try to help her understand what she's done. That's very noble of you, I said. Just remember, you can't change someone who doesn't want to change. As if summoned by our conversation, Rebecca burst through the ballroom doors, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a white storm cloud. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her hair falling from its elegant updo. Ruth, she called out, her voice cracking. Please, I need to talk to you. I turned to face her, and for a moment, I saw not the spoiled, dramatic woman who had tormented me for 3 years, but a terrified bride who was watching her perfect day crumble around her. What would you like to say, Rebecca? I asked, my voice neutral. She stumbled toward me, her hands clasped together as if she were praying. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were. I never meant to. Stop, I said quietly, but the word cut through her rambling like a blade. Rebecca, don't apologize because you found out I have money and power. Apologize because you treated another human being cruelly. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Rebecca, if I had been exactly who you thought I was, Fernando's quiet, unremarkable wife with a small marketing job, would what you did tonight have been acceptable? No, but, she stammered. There is no but, I said firmly. Either it was wrong to slap me and pour wine on me, or it wasn't. My bank account doesn't change the morality of your actions. Travis stepped closer to her bride, his face grim. She's right, Rebecca. You're apologizing because you're scared of the consequences, not because you understand what you did wrong. Rebecca turned to her new husband with desperate eyes. Travis, can't you be serious about calling off the partnership? This is our future we're talking about. No, Travis said quietly. This is your character we're talking about, and after tonight, I'm not sure I know who I married. The ballroom doors opened again and Fernando emerged, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. His hair was disheveled, his tie askew, his face pale with shock and regret. Ruth, please, don't leave like this. We can fix this. I looked at my husband, the man that I had loved enough to hide my success for, the man that I had believed would protect and cherish me, and felt a profound sadness settle over me. Fernando, what exactly do you think we can fix? Can you fix the fact that you've never truly known me? Can you fix 3 years of making me feel like I had to apologize for existing? Can you fix the moment when I needed you most and you chose your sister instead? He reached out toward me, his hand trembling. But I love you. I've always loved you. You love the version of me that you created in your head. You love the quiet, grateful wife who made you feel important. You don't love the real me because you never bothered to find out who she was. That's not true, he protested. I want to know. I want to understand. I shook my head sadly. Fernando, if you had wanted to know me, you would have asked about my work instead of dismissing it. You would have wondered how I could afford things on my supposed salary. You would have noticed that I never talked about my boss or my coworkers, because I didn't have any. I was the boss.
His face crumpled with the weight of realization. I thought you were just being modest. No, I said. I was being invisible,
because somewhere along the way I convinced myself that being small was the price of being loved. The valet approached discreetly, clearly recognizing that I was ready to leave. "Ma'am, your car is ready." I nodded, then turned back to the three people who had shaped this dramatic evening. "Rebecca," I said, "I hope you learned something from tonight. I hope you realize that kindness and respect aren't things you should give only to people who can benefit you." She nodded frantically, tears still streaming down her face. "Travis, you're a good man. Whatever you decide to do about your marriage, remember that you deserve a partner who shares your values." He clasped my hand briefly. "Thank you, Ruth, for everything, past, present, and future." Finally, I looked at Fernando. My husband. The man who had broken my heart, not with infidelity or cruelty, but with simple, devastating indifference. "Fernando, I'll have my lawyer contact you next week about the divorce proceedings." The word divorce made him stagger backward, his face going white. "Ruth, no, please, we can go to counseling. We can work this out." "Some things can't be worked out," I said gently. "Some mistakes reveal truths that can't be undone." I started toward the valet, but Fernando's voice stopped me one last time. "What about our house, our life together, everything we've built?" I turned back, and for the first time all evening, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was peaceful. "Fernando, I built that life. I paid for that house. I created the financial security you've been living in for 3 years, and now I'm taking it back." The implications of my words sunk in slowly. Fernando's comfortable salary had never been enough to support their lifestyle. The house payments, the vacations, the car payments, Rebecca's constant financial emergencies, all of it had been subsidized by my success. "You'll be fine," I continued. "You have your job, your skills, your family. You'll just have to live within your actual means for the first time in years." I could see him doing the math in his head, realizing how much of his life had been built on my hidden fortune. "Ruth, I never knew. I swear I never realized." "I know you didn't. And that's exactly the problem." I walked out of the Grandview Manor into the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in years. The valet held open the door of my car, not the modest Honda that Fernando knew me to drive, but the sleek black Tesla that I kept parked at my downtown office. As I drove through the quiet streets, my phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The story was already spreading through social media, business networks, and local news outlets. By morning, everyone would know about the wedding where a billionaire CEO was slapped by her sister-in-law and publicly humiliated by her husband. But I wasn't thinking about the publicity or the business implications. I was thinking about the woman I had been when I walked into that ballroom and the woman I was now as I drove home. For 3 years, I had tried to be smaller, quieter, less threatening. I had hidden my success because I thought it was what love required. I had accepted disrespect because I thought it was the price of belonging to a family. Tonight, I remembered who I really was. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse apartment, the one Fernando didn't even know I owned, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I had helped shape with my business decisions. My phone had 67 missed calls and over 200 text messages. Some were from reporters, others from business contacts, many from friends and colleagues who had heard about the wedding incident. But the message that mattered most was from Travis, sent at 3 a.m. "Ruth, I wanted to let you know Rebecca and I spent the night talking. Really talking, maybe for the first time. She's beginning to understand what she did wrong, and I think there's hope for us. But more importantly, I want you to know that watching you stand up for yourself tonight was one of the most inspiring things I've ever witnessed. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. The partnership announcement will go out as scheduled next week. Travis. I smiled as I read it. Maybe Rebecca would learn from this experience. Maybe their marriage would survive and even thrive. Maybe people could change when they were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. My lawyer called at 9 a.m. to discuss the divorce proceedings. By 10 a.m., I was in my office, back in my element, surrounded by the team that knew me as Ruth Sinclair, the woman who had built an empire. "Ma'am," my assistant said, poking her head into my office, "there's a Fernando Matthews here to see you. He says he's your husband, but he's not on your approved visitor list." I looked up from my computer, where I was reviewing the final details of the partnership with Travis's firm. "Tell him that Ruth Sinclair doesn't have a husband. If he wants to speak with me, he can make an appointment through proper channels." She nodded and closed the door. Through my office windows, I could see the city sprawling below me, a city where I was known, respected, and valued for exactly who I was. 3 days later, the divorce papers were filed. 7 months later, the dissolution was final. Fernando kept the house. I decided I was feeling generous, but everything else reverted to its rightful owner. Rebecca and Travis's marriage did survive, though it took months of counseling and soul-searching. Rebecca had to confront the ugly truth about her character, and Travis had to decide if he could love someone who was capable of such cruelty. In the end, they worked it out, but their relationship was forever changed by that night. As for me, I never remarried. I dated, I traveled, I built my business into something even more spectacular. But most importantly, I never again made myself smaller for anyone's comfort. Sometimes people ask me if I regretted keeping my identity secret for so long, if I regretted the years I spent hiding who I was. My answer was always the same. I don't regret the experience because it taught me something invaluable. It taught me that love, real love, sees you for who you are and celebrates it. Anything less than that isn't love at all. And late at night, when I stood at my penthouse windows, looking out at the city lights, I remembered the moment when I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high, leaving behind everyone who had tried to make me smaller. That was the night Ruth Sinclair stopped hiding and started living. That was the night I learned that the most powerful revenge isn't cruelty. It's simply refusing to let anyone diminish your worth ever again.